In 1975, Pink Floyd set the music world on fire. Literally. For the cover of Wish You Were Here, two businessmen shook hands on a Hollywood backlot while one of them went up in flames. A dangerous stunt that became one of rock's most unforgettable images. But behind that burning handshake lies a story of absence, of loss, and of the surreal brilliance of Hipgnosis, the design team who turned album covers into works of art. Relatedly, you cannot talk about Wish You Were Here and its cover art without touching on the story of a ghost who returned. Syd Barrett, the band's vanished founder who shocked his former bandmates with an unannounced studio visit while they were recording the very song written somewhat in his honor. In this episode, we'll unravel the meaning behind the images, the legacy of Hipgnosis, the heartbreak of Barrett's appearance, and how Wish You Were Here became one of the most emotionally resonant albums in rock history. Hi, I'm Andy Fenstermaker, host of Poetic Wax, a music history series and podcast where I dig into the record collection I've been building since the 1990s to explore the sometimes little known or little told history of a band, album, or song from within. In the mid-1970s, Pink Floyd was a band haunted by absence. Their rise from London's underground psychedelic scene to become one of the world's biggest acts had been extraordinary, but it carried a shadow. Syd Barrett, the band's co-founder and visionary, had long since drifted away, consumed by mental illness and drugs. By 1975, Barrett was physically gone, but spiritually everywhere. His presence felt in every note. As the band began working on Wish You Were Here, themes of absence, longing, and disconnection began to define both the music and the imagery. Pink Floyd turned once again to their longtime collaborator, Storm Thorgerson of Hipgnosis, the design studio responsible for some of the most striking covers in rock history. Thorgerson believed the artwork needed to echo the record's themes without being obvious. Hipgnosis co-founder Aubrey Powell shot the cover images. Quote, "We wanted something that made you feel absence," he later recalled, he being Thorgerson. Instead of literal depictions, the art had to be metaphorical and surreal, something that compelled you to look closer. The central image and one of rock's most famous covers was a risky and unforgettable stunt. Two businessmen shaking hands on a Hollywood backlot while one of them is engulfed in flames. The shoot took place at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank, California. The man on fire was stuntman Ronnie Rondell, who wore a flame-retardant suit beneath his business attire. But it wasn't without danger, and it was physically demanding. Rondell was set ablaze 15 times until a gust of wind blew the flames towards his face, which singed his mustache and his eyebrow. This was the final take as the wind forced the shoot to stop. What resulted was a calm, businesslike handshake amid chaos. That was the point. The symbolism razor sharp. Members of Pink Floyd were deeply cynical about the record industry. To them, business handshakes were insincere gestures, often leading to betrayal and exploitation. Getting burned wasn't just a phrase, it was reality. That iconic image crystallized their frustration with an industry built on surface-level smiles and hidden costs. At its heart, the Burning Handshake wasn't just a shocking stunt. It was philosophy in visual form. Storm Thorgerson explained that the image grew from the idea that people often hide their real emotion out of fear of vulnerability, afraid of getting burned if they reveal too much. The two businessmen, stiff and composed in their suits, embody that insincerity. One man smiling through the ritual of a handshake, even as he is literally consumed by flames. It's a perfect metaphor for the way that personal truth gets buried under performance, whether in the music industry or in everyday life. Hipgnosis, the design studio founded by Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell, were masters of this kind of surreal storytelling. They weren't just responsible for Wish You Were Here. They had already created the prism of Dark Side of the Moon and would go on to deliver the hypnotic cover for Animals. Beyond Pink Floyd, their fingerprints are all over rock canon. SF Sorrow by The Pretty Things, Electric Warrior by T-Rex, Led Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy, Genesis's The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, and Peter Gabriel's Stark solo debut, often called Car. The covers Hipgnosis created weren't just decoration. They were visual worlds that made the music inside feel larger, stranger, and more mythic. We've gotten away from a lot of that. There's a great documentary on the company. Do seek that one out. Before diving into the other imagery within Wish You Were Here, I want to pause for a brief moment. You can check out the transcript of this episode and hear the music discussed within over on my Substack. Sign up for free at poeticwax.substack.com. Also, quick shout out and thank you to my paid subscribers. Join today for just $2 a month and get early access to new episodes, members-only videos, and much, much more. You can also leave a super thanks tip if you're watching this on YouTube. Hipgnosis didn't just stop at one image. The theme of absence permeated through the entire package. On the back cover, a faceless salesman stands in a desert, literally absent from himself. On the printed inner sleeve, a veiled nude woman appears ghostly, her identity obscured. In fact, she'd been erased entirely, so only the veil appears in a strange shape floating mysteriously in a field lined by trees. Another photograph showed a diver entering a lake without making a splash, suggesting invisibility, as though even nature refused to acknowledge him. Honestly, you could say the same about the woman, too. And then came the final twist, inspired by Roxy Music's Country Life. The record was sold shrink-wrapped in opaque plastic. Buyers couldn't even see the artwork until they tore away the wrapper, reinforcing the idea of concealment, absence, and hidden truths. The only hint was a sticker of a mechanical handshake, cold and artificial. George Hardy created the original mechanical handshake graphic affixed to the shrink wrap and later used on the labels. Another interesting aside, Columbia Records in the US initially resisted the black wrap, but Pink Floyd insisted. EMI in the UK was a bit more relaxed about it. And for the band, when they were showed the mock-up, they reportedly responded with cheers. Overall, Storm Thorgerson interpreted the album's lyrics as expressing unfulfilled presence, rather than focusing solely on Syd Barrett's mental struggles. I think he conveyed it well. But you can't talk about this album without talking about Barrett himself. You know, that crazy diamond. The artwork and the music are literally inseparable. The emotional center of the record is Shine On You Crazy Diamond, a 9-part suite that bookends the album. Written as a kind of direct tribute to Syd Barrett, the song blends sorrow with celebration. Its opening is spacious and mournful. The lyrics, written by Roger Waters, remember Barrett as a crazy diamond who both dazzled and suffered. Listeners at the time knew this was not just a metaphor. Barrett had been their guiding light, and losing him left a permanent absence. When Barrett unexpectedly visited the studio during recording, overweight and with shaved eyebrows and head, the band members were shaken to their core. He barely recognized them, and honestly, they hardly recognized him too. That moment Barrett suddenly appeared in the studio left the band stunned. Roger Waters reportedly broke down in tears when he realized who was standing there. In Crazy Diamond, Syd Barrett and the Dawn of Pink Floyd by Mike Watkinson and Pete Anderson from 2001, Thorgerson would note that, quote, 2 or 3 people cried. He sat around and talked for a bit, but he wasn't really there. He being Barrett. Accounts differ on exactly what he said, but one widely repeated line was that Barrett listened to the playback and muttered that, quote, it sounds a bit old. Others recall him saying that he was ready to do his bit. He reportedly returned a few days before disappearing once again. Either way, that moment was devastating. His presence was a living reminder of the friend and genius they had lost, and the encounter solidified the song's emotional weight. In Crazy Diamond, Waters would comment on the song. Shine On is not really about Syd. He's just a symbol for all the extremes of absence some people have to indulge in because it's the only way they can cope with how fucking sad it is. modern life to withdraw completely. I found that terribly sad. The title track, Wish You Were Here, carries the same themes, but in a more direct, universal way. With Gilmour's acoustic guitar and Waters' plain-spoken lyrics, it feels like a conversation across a chasm. It's a song about Barrett, yes, but also about the broader human experience of absence. The missing of someone who is no longer present, whether through distance, through estrangement, through death. The radio style fade in at the beginning, mimicking someone tuning into the song, emphasizes a sense of disconnection, like reaching for a signal that isn't fully there. Its chorus, how I wish you were here, resonates far beyond Barrett's story, striking listeners as one of the most universal lines in rock music. Meanwhile, Welcome to the Machine and Have a Cigar deliver blistering critiques of the music industry, the very handshakes Hipgnosis set ablaze in the artwork. Together, the songs and images form this cycle, longing for genuine human connection while battling against systems that thrive on artifice. When Wish You Were Here was released in September of 1975, not everyone understood the cover. Some critics found it pretentious, too clever for its own good, but fans connected deeply. The Burning Handshake became one of rock's most recognizable symbols, and the entire suite of images turned the album into a piece of conceptual art rather than just a collection of songs. Decades later, cover art like this is revered by music fans for its ability to tell a story without words. Storm Thorgerson once explained the cover's haunting power. Quote, "What's the worst thing you can say to someone? Wish you were here, because you're not." Now, more than 50 years later, the imagery and themes of Wish You Were Here feel eerily current. In an age defined by digital connection, many still experience profound absence. Friends present on screens and in social feeds, but are missing in reality. Relationships are strained by distance and distraction. It's hard to make friends in this day and age once you hit a certain age. I mean, I'm 45 and I feel it every single day. The faceless salesman can be seen as a metaphor for the curated artificial personas of social media. The diver without a splash mirrors how easily people can vanish online without a trace. And the burning handshake? Well, that resonates in a world still negotiating insincere deals, corporate exploitation, the cost of chasing success, our fractured healthcare system. The album cover of Wish You Were Here is a language of absence, of concealment, of longing that speaks not only to the mid-70s music industry, but also to how we navigate authenticity and connection in today's society 50 years later. Thus, Wish You Were Here remains one of the most striking visual companions to music ever created. It's about the pain of absence, the deceit of surface-level gestures, and the invisible toll of disconnection. With a handshake in flames, a diver who leaves no trace, and faces and bodies literally hidden from view, the artwork gave a visual language to what Pink Floyd was already saying in sound. Together, the music and the imagery created a masterpiece. Wish You Were Here is an album that made absence visible and unforgettable.